All right. Welcome back to ScaleTalk. It's been a while, and we try to pick a topic that makes a lot of sense for the scale builders community. And of course, everybody knows Dana.
Hey guys.
And he's a scale builder aficionado right from day one. I think you were born that way. I don't know. With
Attention to detail maybe has been on my side.
All the modeling you've done and all that work, it's amazing.
Sure. Well, thanks. Yeah. It again, you can really sort of do the things you want to do in this hobby. To if you're detail oriented, or if you like to do get in and do these projects and stuff. This is a great hobby to be in.
Yeah, it sure is. So you guys don't know this, but we also fly RC, and today I was flying my big 5-cell brushless P51.
Yeah.
Which is a nice scale replica.
Yeah, that flew well today. Really well.
Yeah, it was hot today. I really was ripping on it pretty bad.
Yeah, we had a great time. I mean, that's another thing. The great thing about this hobby is it's forever reaching, right? You can, of course, get into trucks and cars, which is probably our mainstay. But especially trucks. But yeah, you can certainly, there's all kinds of things when it comes to quads and planes. So we're in it all. We're passionate about the hobby, when it comes to planes, trains, and almost, well, not trains, but planes, cars, trucks, and the occasional train, maybe.
Your dad's right into trains.
Exactly.
And tonight you were flying a Piper Cub.
Yep, the new Cub from E-Flight, the 84-inch wingspan, big guy.
Big plane.
Carbon Cub SS, I think it's called. Foamy, but 84 inches, really flies well. Had a lot of fun. Really great day for that, for sure.
And the nice thing about what you've done with the airplane is before you even flew it, you did a little extra scale stuff on it, just a little bit of a better stripe kit on it, and just a few extras to give it some livery and
well, that's it. You want to make it your own, right? Like, it's. I don't want it to look like it came from the factory. I mean, sometimes you do, but oftentimes you want to add those little touches that are your own to make it your own, and that's certainly what I did in this case.
And that brings us to our topic today.
Yeah.
Because we want to spend ScaleTalk today actually talking about what we do with the bodywork.
Right.
The exterior stuff that you see on the cars, and of course we got the vintage 959 project here that Dana's just begun to restore.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk a little bit about this vintage body shell, of course, that came with that. And we got a couple other things here. The old Maori Big Bear.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what we want to talk about is just restoring techniques, what type of bodies, what paint you should use, how, when, where, just things that both you and I have done over the years, just to create what we're going to create. And just work with Lexan or hard body or again, as in, I said before, different paints and stuff. So
just to get to some real basics that most people already know, here's my old rabbit shell. This is the shell that you've seen in the Basement Racing series. This is a super fun car, by the way. I can't wait to do basement racing again.
Yeah, no. Well, it's almost like a wintertime thing, right? We're in the heat of summer, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be fun to get back in the basement.
So on this Lexan, I used Tamiya Lexan paint.
Yeah.
And the PS series, and I painted it on the inside. And then I did all my stickers and livery on the outside, including the carbon hood sticker on the outside. So that's a pretty simple, traditional sort of Lexan paint job, the way it would be typically done.
And I know we have a lot of, fan base out there. We're getting to the point where, we've got new customers, we've got returning, clients, we've got fans, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
PS is for Lexan bodies.
Polycarbonate, yeah.
And TS, this is the Tamiya brand, is for the hard bodies. So, just clarify that out there for those new guys coming along or new gals coming along.
Yeah.
That's something to know.
Yeah. PS for polystyrene and TS for, I don't know what the T's for, but it's for the hard body stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
There's also, Tamiya also has a really nice set of paints, especially in the TS lineup, because they provide all the different paint shades and variations for all the different kinds of tanks.
Yeah.
And all that special scale stuff that they've been doing for years. They do really nice scale modeling, and I'm so glad that they came out with with all the paint shades and paint colors, and there's a variety's huge there.
Sure, and with the TS paints, as we said, they're for the hard bodies. But I've done a few tricks with them and actually put them on some Lexan. But I got a little formula that we'll get into on how to do that. So yeah, we'll get to that point at some point.
So let's talk about the 959 for a second.
Sure.
Let me just move this out of the way a little bit here, the mechanical side, and let's have a talk about what's going on with this body. Like, maybe you can describe this to me. Is this the way? Is this the sort of the box art theme, or what is this? I know the shell is vintage, but other than that, what is it?
Okay,
tell me about it.
Okay, great. So. Of course, this is my, and we've talked about this in previous, but this is the holy grail for me. This is the 1986 Tamiya 959, all original, all vintage, and that is the body that came with it, and that body is extremely fragile. That's why I believe they'll never make a re-release of this particular model. I know Tamiya has been doing a lot of re-releases. I don't think they'll ever do this as a re-release, just because they tried something new to get a lot of detail. Back then, they tried something new to get a lot of detail into this specific model, which I think it was blow molding. I'm not an expert. And they just became way too fragile. But this is it. This is the original, and I'm stuck with painting it. Oftentimes when you get these models, I got mine through eBay. Oftentimes you get these models and they've been used and abused to some extent.
Yeah.
And being a fragile body. So this is what I'm left with. I've got, a 30-plus-year-old body that I am going to restore. And that's what I'm up against, and it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of dedication. But that's what I'm up against.
So unlike the rabbit body, which I sprayed with the Tamiya PS, PS. This body, if you look on the inside, hasn't been sprayed.
No.
It looks like it's actually been brushed.
It has.
So, I mean, the colors look good on the outside, but on the inside you can really tell. It's going to be real hard to see in the camera with the white, but it's just full of brush strokes and lines and...
Yeah, which actually, sorry to interrupt, but which actually is kind of neat, because if you do a good job, you don't necessarily see those brush strokes.
Oh no, you don't
on the opposite side.
No, you don't see them on the outside.
And I didn't realize that, so it actually is. It is a technique in which someone could use.
So do you think that they actually used a Lexan paint on it, or is it something else then?
I'm not sure. Because one of the reasons why Lexan paint exists, as we know, is because it's flexible.
Oh yes.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it won't flake off, and I think that's one of the reasons why it is used. I mean, sure there are many. Well, that one, being one of them.
Adhesion, maybe.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So this has flaked off over the years. I don't know if that's age or the type of paint that was used. And that was what I was up against. If you look, that side's half decent, that's closest to the camera, and the other side had some flaking paint, and then so I've started the removal process or stripping process to get rid of some of the flaking paint that had been there that either dried out or just flaked off due to use and abuse.
Or maybe it was the wrong paint and it doesn't stick.
Absolutely.
Because I've done that too. I've actually tried doing stripes and stuff on the inside of Lexan bodies, and then, a couple of months later you realize my whole stripe is falling off.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
and I do recommend, when you're doing these restos and you've gotten to the point where, now you've spent all the time and effort to get it where you want, where then you can recreate it or restore it, I highly recommend using Tamiya masking tape. I find it works really well.
That's a good tip.
Gives you really clean edges. Tamiya masking tape is A1.
And I noticed that it goes around corners a little nicer than some others too.
It sure does. So and I would also use Tamiya or the likes, one specifically designed for RC cars. And don't go to your local Canadian Tire. And the reason why I say that is the molecules on the paint, and again, I'm no expert, but the molecules in the paint or the way it sprays seems to be finer and smaller. Therefore, it can wrap itself around the small details of the body that you're doing, and it really gives you that fine detail. Whereas if you go to Canadian Tire, it's just like a big blob of paint that's gone over top, and you lose some of that detail.
For some of you American and overseas guys, Canadian Tire is like the giant
Right.
automotive, housewares, everything store.
Yeah, your Home Depots, your
Home Depots, Lowe's, you know,
Yeah.
it's one of those kinds of great big box stores where you can get lots of great paint, but I don't think the spray is as fine as you need for this kind of detail work. And yeah, if you keep spraying long enough, yeah, sure, you're going to turn it certain colors, but it's all going to be thick and runny and
Right.
gross. So
Yeah. That's again a top tip for you guys out there. That be
Yeah.
sure to go out there, go to your local hobby store, support your local hobby store, and get the right paint for the job.
So talking about the restoration now, you're trying to get the paint off.
Correct.
So how does one get paint off a 30-year-old body without scratching and scraping and having it fit?
Sure.
I mean, I don't know if I have the patience for that.
Right.
How do you do it?
And you know, here's what I know or what I've been doing. Believe it or not, and this is out there. This isn't nothing new. I borrowed this off of you know, the internet and the scene, the RC you know, network out there. But this is a trick that I'm using, which is using brake fluid, .4 specifically.
.4.
Yeah, brake fluid. And what I'm doing at this point with this model in particular is if you look carefully, I'm not going to remove the white because the white is done well.
It is.
And it's going to save me a lot of time. But the
Yeah.
blue, which is, you know, near the wheel wells and the front, took all of the brunt of the hit, and the paint started to flake off and so on and so forth. So I'm trying to remove all the blue without removing any of the other paint. So I have to, I have to literally paint on the brake fluid without getting any of the other areas.
I see.
Without getting the brake fluid, and this is another tip, without getting any of the brake fluid on the outside over the decals, because the decals are important.
Oh yeah.
And if you get brake fluid on the decals, it's just the print is just going to disappear immediately.
Oh wow.
So I'm actually brushing on the brake fluid, letting it sit.
Yeah.
And then coming back half an hour later and taking that same paintbrush and gingerly lifting the paint. And what it does is it just sort of bubbles, softens the paint.
Okay.
And then you're able to sort of pry it off gingerly.
So you're unpainting it.
I'm unpainting it. The reason why we use brake fluid, or that specific brake fluid, is it doesn't cloud the Lexan.
Ah, yes, that's true.
Right? It's not going to melt the Lexan. And it actually, when you wipe it away, it wipes away clear. And it doesn't necessarily cloud it too much. And so that's one of the reasons why we're using this product. I'll tell you though, it's not easy.
Wow.
It is a solution.
Yeah.
For those experts out there, if you have experience in this, if you've done something else, feel free to comment. Feel free to, you know, send out some tips or talk to us about this, because that's the method I'm using. That's the method I know at this point. It is working, but it's very difficult. I am lucky though, because it was paint or brushed on.
Yes, that's right.
Which I think is actually helping me a little bit. Had it been sprayed on, which you can use on the spray paints, but I feel as though it would be that much more difficult also.
This, it's really hard to show you guys this in the video, but there is a level of detail on this body, this particular body, that I don't think could be done with modern Lexan processes.
Right.
The corners on here, these are so sharp. These corners are like perfectly square corners, and all of these little trim lines and the vent pockets and the bottom of the doors, like, I mean, the paint literally is just constantly going over these details in the body. Like, I don't know how you're going to get that stuff off of there. It's coming.
It's coming.
And it's coming out really clear. Like, it's super nice.
It's
really.
not bad for something that's been used and is 30 years old.
It's just amazing that this is all one piece, you know?
Yeah, it's actually in decent shape, and
Yeah.
and you sort of raise the next step. I mean, it has a few cracks in it, and so, you know, obviously once you get it painted and protected, and, you know, I plan on using this one. Not, you know, I'm not going to bash it by any means, but I want to put it in a few videos and watch it go around the basement track perhaps and so on. But, you know, once it's done, then you know, if you've spent all that time and energy, there are tricks that you can use to then protect the body from further cracks, or if you have an existing crack, mend that crack that may be in a wheel well. The top of the arch of a wheel well oftentimes cracks because the front end blows and what have you. So there are a few tricks in which you can do that to help it, give it some rigidity. Which is and again, this is out there in the internet RC world, but it's shoe glue and the mesh tape for drywall. Yeah. Yes.
That's true. That works.
Now, I may not use it on this one in particular because I don't like the finish on the underneath of the body isn't great, but it certainly would protect it from further damage.
That's a good idea.
If you've got one that won't necessarily be as much as a shelf queen, not saying this will be, but it probably will sit on the shelf often. I don't know if I'll necessarily go that route, but that's a tip that if you're making a restoration and then you want to protect it. The shoe glue and mesh tape works well, for sure.
I should have done that on the Rabbit.
Yeah.
Because this thing had enough front end impact over the last couple of winters that the corners up here around the sides of the hood, the grill, these corners started cracking. And I did manage to put some of that hot glue on it.
Oh, yeah.
I used your gun, which is the big hot glue gun.
Yeah, there are a variety of glue guns, right?
I have the little tiny craft one there with the small glue, and it works, but it's not actually hot enough to really bond well with the Lexan. And your big gun worked really well for that. And all I had to do with your big gun was just put a little line down the corners here, and that was probably the best repair I ever did on this.
Yeah, it looks good.
I should have done the mesh though.
Yeah, for sure.
For something that gets heavily used like that.
Yeah.
Daily, like regular, and kept clipping the wall in the corner and your car.
Yeah.
All that impact, that would have been a way better repair, I think, than the hot glue. But the hot glue was nice to get a little fine edge right in the corner there. And
it's a combination of things. We use what works, right? And whatever seems to be working at that time, we use it. And I think the combination of shoe glue, mesh tape, hot glue of different varieties, different temperatures, certainly will do the trick for a lot of those repairs to your Lexan bodies and even your hard bodies at times.
So if you were to refinish this one, for say...
Yep. So this is a hard body.
This is a vintage hard body.
Yeah.
But would you have to strip this down? Would you just sand it and keep putting top coats on it? Or what kind of method would you use to refinish something like a hard body?
Yeah, we're sort of mystified as to what to do with this body, but it's certainly... it's a good demo as to what you can or should do. What do me personally, I would want to sand it down, and that's the key thing, especially for hard bodies. If you want your paint to stick, last, and really, sort of stay in the corners of your body, sand it down. Sand it. Like once you've, and use a fine grit, a really fine grit, give it a good sand. So I would probably sand this one down in particular, strip it, take all the decals off that are existing, of course, and then I would probably prime it with a purpose-built primer. Probably go sand it again, and then I would hit it with the proper paint or the TS paint that we use. Now, I had mentioned a little trick. It's actually for hard bodies. It's not for Lexan bodies, but you can use. Actually, you can use PS paint and you can use TS paint on this.
Okay.
My Claude has PS and TS paint on it, and it seemed to give it a nice finish, really nice finish for some particular reason. It just seemed to have the right finish on it. So,
I think what I like about the Tamiya line of paints is that you can put their clear coat.
Oh, true.
On top of whatever. That their clear coat finish is just amazing, and you may have to put 7 or 8 coats on it to actually get a really nice smooth layered finish on it. But you can cover over decals and everything with it. It's just amazing, that stuff.
Yep. And I always have a nice decal kit in case, to hide mistakes. Fingerprints.
That's handy, eh?
Yeah, it's true.
Put a stripe somewhere where it's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, this one I'm going to restore at some point. I just haven't found a use for it. But once I do, I'll have to go through the process of stripping it down, sanding it down, priming it, and then painting it with the proper paint, and away we go.
Yeah.
Another trick too, if we go back to the Lexan.
Sure, yeah.
you can use the method, as we all know, we paint on the inside, right? And then away we go.
Yeah.
You can use the same paint that you would use on the inside, again, PES, and you can paint the exterior of your Lexan body too.
That's right.
The the Blazer, my Blazer that you've seen, you know, a lot of people have come up to me and said, hey, is that a hard body?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, it's a Lexan. They're like, my God, it looks good. And the reason for that is it's been painted on the outside with PS paint, or Lexan paint, for better words.
Yep.
And I think that gives it a really good finish. It gives you the right sheen level.
It's less glossy, right?
Yeah.
And it's much more natural on an oldish vehicle, like the Blazer.
Yeah. And again, it looks great. And so, you know, if this particular body was too far gone, if I couldn't remove the paint, or the paint job was just horrific on it, and I have restored a wild one, and I ran into that same problem where it had been painted on the interior and it just was done. I couldn't use enough brake fluid or had the time or effort to remove it.
Yeah.
So then I said, well, what do I need to do? And so I painted it on the exterior with the same paint, and the finish on it was unbelievable. I was really pleased. Really nice.
That's also a great way to do a restoration on a body that actually does have damage.
Yeah.
Because if you have to do a repair like a shoe glue and tape on something major like a front end or a rear bumper or something that's actually torn, you can do the repairs on the inside where it's hidden.
Good point. And
then just keep it clean on the outside and get the best finish you can on the outside with the exterior painting instead.
Yeah, yeah, and that's it, because once you've made the repair on the inside, it's really hard to paint it because the repair is in the way.
That's right.
So yeah, good point.
Yeah.
But if I was up against painting this on the exterior, then, you know, look at all these decals. What do? So that kind of puts into perspective, or we should have a brief conversation about decals, because they're not all equal out there, which I've learned.
There's a couple of tips for getting decals off too, and this applies to hard bodies and the Lexan. I found that when you buy the hard bodies like a New Bright Jeep or something like this, and you want to get a new paint job on it and get all the mud or whatever it says, you know, mud digger or something, you know, to get the sticker off, you can try to get on the edge of it there and then kind of peel it away there, and if you're lucky you might get some sticker. If they're really old, they usually tear instead of coming off clean. But they almost always, even in the hard body and the Lexans, they almost always come off clean with just a little bit of raised temperature. I used to put the body, instead of using a heat gun or something really hot like a hot hair dryer or whatever, instead of using something really hot that may or may not actually damage the body itself, I used to put the body on top of the furnace vent.
Oh yeah.
Turn the furnace on full blast.
Good point.
And just blow a whole bunch of hot air on it here in the shop, and the body would get hot. I mean, it's not hot enough to melt, that's obvious, but it's so hot that the glue on the stickers gets all soft and squishy, and you can actually just, even the paper decals on some of the hard bodies, you can actually just peel that sucker right off of there. If the temperature's right, you can get that whole decal off, and there's no sticky stuff left on it.
Good point.
It's really clean.
Good tip. You know, in a sort of an opposite way, I've used that trick when painting too, right?
Yeah, like, I do the same.
You know, we live half the year in a cold climate, and you know, so it's not as easy just to go and put it in the sun and warm up the paint and warm up the body.
That's right.
So yeah, putting it over your floor register, you know, and warming up the paint and the body is a great tip. So it's obviously a great tip for moving decals also. So that's an important. That's good, thank you. So
part of the fame of Tamiya, like you were saying, is the quality of the decals. Like, I don't know if you guys can see this, but I'll point it right at it here. Look at this one right on the hood here. Look at the colors in that and how crisp that is, and the quality of the decal print. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing, and this is something that was produced minimum 30 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
This is a super crisp decal. Like, that is so nice.
Yeah.
And I mean, how do you get another one? I mean, that, you know, when you're at the 30 years old stage, like, how do you actually come up with replacement parts?
Well, there's a replacement decal sheet for a 959, and it's vintage. It's a mid-80s replacement decal sheet.
Wow.
And
that's got to be a rare item. Like,
it is super rare. You don't find these everywhere. You can find them on eBay occasionally.
Yeah, wow.
These, and they're not cheap. They are not cheap. They're as expensive as some entry level RC cars out there. That's how expensive these decals are.
Let me have a look at that.
Yeah, sure, go for it. But you know, when you're doing this, and the reason why I have that decal sheet in particular is that if I have a failure of removing the paint from the inside, then I'm going to proceed to paint the exterior of this body, and therefore I need a vintage decal sheet in order to mimic the box art.
Wow.
Now, saying that, you can get this decal sheet at any time, but it's someone who's created their own.
Like a reproduction.
Reproduction. And they're not all equal. As you were alluding to, sometimes you peel them off. These ones you cut out in particular, but sometimes you peel them off and they've used a white backing and it doesn't necessarily sit correctly. And you know,
yeah, the print is off from the cut.
Correct.
Yeah, I've experienced that too.
So you almost like have a white border around the decal, and yet it's off-centered, right? So you have 1 mil and then 2 mil of the white border, and it doesn't look right.
Yeah.
And you know, guys and gals, we're trying to be scale. We're trying to look good. We're trying to have fun and make this as scale as possible. So those things make a difference, you know. The little things makes a difference. You know, when your bud comes up to you and looks at it, and you want to make sure that you've done what's necessary in order for it to look right. And we always talk about the little things, and that's a little thing that'll go a long way. So, you know, if you have the capabilities and you can find something like this, going after the original decal sheet, if it exists, is important when restoring your your RC car.
I would say, if you are to look at like a really good looking scale rig, you know, like your 911, or you know, this particular car, or many of the scale trucks that we've talked about, even some of them that we've shown on events. Best of show at the Steg 6 event in May was Matt's incredible FJ tuber build.
Yeah, beautiful.
I think I'm willing to bet that the majority of the effort that goes into a scale rig is probably on the outside.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's the quality of the paint, it's the quality of the decal work, the quality of the tube work, or the interior details that are visible.
Yeah.
I think we spend the most time on those very few things. You know?
Yeah, I agree.
And
I mean,
the rig may have hundreds of components, but in this case, this is one component that sets the tone for the entire build. You know, so I think, I don't know. It's a toss-up for me. You know, do you want to spend a small fortune on a decal sheet, you know?
Yeah.
Which you are... You almost don't want to cut it out because you know what I mean?
You know, it has its inherent value just the way it is.
Yeah,
right?
just like that.
Like this is its most valuable state, right? For sure.
But on the other hand, once you've got your 959 all restored, you've got a really nice vintage car.
Yeah.
And it just wouldn't be the same if you didn't have the proper decals on it.
I agree. 100%.
The finishing touch wouldn't be there. Like, even if it was a repo decal set, it just wouldn't be the same.
Yeah, I agree. So, you know, stay tuned for this one in particular. There's going to be a few updates along the way. You know, just to sort of recap, okay, so I've started restoring it. I'm telling you, it's going to be a long time. There's a complete interior that comes with this that I'm going to have to restore, so we're looking at some styrene work.
Oh, wow.
You know, so this is sort of just on its, just on the start of its restoration, which is going to take some time, but I'm excited to do.
And you've just started onto the restoration of the mechanical side too.
Yes.
I mean, there's the rest of the car.
Yep.
And you started doing a little bit of shock work on it and just some looking over.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that suspension arm thing?
Yeah, of course, for sure.
Are they in here?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is really cool.
Being such a rare model, there's, you want to bring it back to, the way it was, right?
Yep.
And
good shape.
And in great shape. So there's a lot of steps that need to happen in restoring it. One being, as we discussed, like the shocks are completely frozen on it. It's been sitting on someone's shelf, thankfully.
This one started working here.
Yeah,
so
that one's working.
That one's good.
So you've got to go to the point where you're, taking apart gingerly, taking apart all of the mechanics, seeing what's good, what isn't. A lot of your oil is gummed up in your shocks and so on and so forth. So that's these are the steps that you have to take. But you really get into some fine detail. And here's a suspension arm that I've just purchased off of, I think this was a UK eBay buy. Now this suspension arm I think is right there. I think Chris is pointing at it.
Yeah.
And then there's the ball end that's in this one in particular. And this one has a ball end also.
For the shock mount at the bottom, right?
Right. That ball end has a slight hairline crack. And one of the biggest problems with the Tamiya brand, especially as they got old, is where these screws went into this hard plastic.
Yeah.
They would hairline crack, right?
Yep.
So this one has 2 hairline cracks in the front suspension.
Yeah.
I managed to pick up ones that have no hairline cracks.
They're amazing. They're incredibly clean.
So, as much as, if I can take the body from you, as much as, look at that. That's just messy. It's got to be completely restored. And, the visual and that everyone's going to see that.
Yeah.
Yet, I'm going so far as to replace these because they have a hairline crack. So that's the level we're at. We like to, sometimes, go to the levels that need to go in order to create something that's just super scale, super awesome. And so that's what I'm up against. It's going to be a long, arduous repair. You've got to go through all the mechanics, as I said. You got to go through the suspension. Vintage radio. So we've got a vintage radio. Look at the size of this thing. It's like a tank.
That is one big radio.
Yeah. So there's a lot to it. There's a lot to restoring these beauties. And so, you've just got to do what's necessary. And thank God there are resources out there like your neighbors. Thank God there's resources like the internet.
Yeah.
And then there's all the forums out there to really sort of dive in and help you with these restoration projects. And that's what we're trying to do here today.
Do you think at some point, though, there's a little bit of a worry that, when you see these suspension arms on the market, you think to yourself, they may never be available ever again?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
This might be the last set of suspension arms that's ever on eBay that doesn't have a crack at the ball joint.
Well, I think the price is indicative of that.
Yeah.
It's not cheap. Yeah.
But how could you ever replace it any other way, right?
Of course.
I mean, it's the same with the Decal kit. So
definitely.
I mean, when I was working on full size cars, you've seen the pictures are all that's left of my '68 Mustang restoration. And I had a 75 Torino Grand Sport. That was a really nice car. Those restorations, I put in major work on the detail on that. And that's the same kind of thing as this. But, I learned the hard way that no matter how much money you've already spent, you cannot buy reproduction fenders that are any good.
There you go. You've heard it first.
It doesn't matter what they cost. The only ones that fit are the original ones.
Yeah.
I'm sure some
and
of you guys...
it's across the board,
You guys have had stories about that too that are watching the video. And, even if somebody tried reproducing these suspension arms, or let's say, like Tamiya has re-released a lot of the cars.
They have.
And they've made some subtle changes.
Yeah.
And they've made changes in the plastic compound, which is probably for the better.
For sure.
But at the end of the day, you cannot say, my restoration is 100% vintage parts.
Right.
Because you can mix and match a whole bunch of the reproduction stuff. In your case, you don't have that chance. Like the 959 is a one and that's it.
Yeah. You
have to get the original parts.
Yeah, absolutely. You know how much stressful that can be. Like when you're actually doing especially working on the body. I mean, you can't make mistakes. If you make a mistake, if you're gonna get one, you're gonna have to spend a whole paycheck by buying another one, and then you have to.
Yeah.
You can make the same mistake again, So you're right. Yeah, original parts is key, especially for some epic builds like the Tamiya 959. It's one of those iconic cars that you really want to make sure that you're going to this level to restore. But it doesn't have to always be that way, Like you can just, if you've got something out there that's been sitting on your shelf and you just want to throw some things together and have some fun, you can do that too. But we like to make sure that we're scale and having a lot of fun, and so sometimes we go to this level.
This is coming right along, actually. Like I haven't paid much attention to how your progress is going, but the Lexan is coming out really clear. So this method is working.
I'm quite pleased with it. Again, it's just labor intensive, and that's okay. That's as much as it's painstaking. It's a lot of fun too. So.
I spent 40 hours sanding the body on my '68 Mustang.
Well, see, there you go. It's a
passion,
right? It's a
and
love.
It was all the body work was already done. Between primer coats, I spent 40 hours sanding it.
Yep. So if there's guys out there doing some of these resto of RC cars, let us know. Make some comments. I'd love to see some pics. I'd love to see some comments about what you're doing out there.
And if you have a 959, post up.
Absolutely.
Wherever your threads or your videos are, because we'd love to see what you're doing too. And if you're using the box art library, or if you've got it changed up to some kind of a different vintage library, that'd be neat to see.
Yeah, that would be cool to see.
Yeah.
So we're having a lot of fun here, and I can't wait till it's done. But it's going to take some time.
Yep. Well, I'm sure glad you brought this over to talk about it.
Great. Thanks for having me.
And make sure you post your comments down below about what you're doing for body restorations, or if you have any other tips, like how to get your stickers off, if you've come up with some tips for that, or removing paint. If you know of other methods other than the .4 brake fluid, then make sure you write those in so the rest of the community can see as well. And we look forward to hearing your comments and feedback. And thanks for bringing these cars in. That's really cool.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was great to see you again.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Enjoy, guys.
Okay.
Like, subscribe, share, comment, and we'll see you again soon on the Scale Talk. Bye-bye.